Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm here with my co-host.
Fuck me gently with a chainsaw. I'm Jason Harris, comedian, filmmaker, podcaster without borders.
Oh, I mean, do podcasts ever have borders?
I go into war zones and record podcasts, Josh.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah. If you need a podcast recorded in your war zone,
don't call
preferably
Jason.
about movies.
Yeah, don't
hit me up.
Don't do that. In this season of Awesome Movie Year,
I'm like a doctor without borders, except I have no value at all.
Yes, I can imagine those, those refugees thinking, well, let's reach out and we could get a doctor or we could get a podcaster. But only one. Which one do we get?
Let's get a guy with comedic slant on pop culture.
So in this season of Awesome Movie Year, we're talking about the films of 1989. And this episode is my personal pick, which also happens to be my favorite movie of all time, Heathers.
Yeah. It is your favorite movie of all time. You must be excited for this episode.
I'm excited, but I'm also a little apprehensive because I have a feeling it's not your favorite movie of all time, and I'm not sure how you felt about it.
Well, the story shall unravel as we go on throughout the podcast. I can't tell you just now because the listeners might turn it off if we give it away in Act 1.
That's true. We got to build the suspense.
Yeah.
But I do love this movie. I have seen it many times.
And of course, the quote that I introduced myself with is one of the many memorable lines of this film.
This movie is insanely quotable.
Yeah.
But when it was released, it was not a success. We could have included this film in our flop episode or in our cult classic episode because it did poorly at the box office, but then has really built its reputation over time. At the time it was released, it grossed $1.1 million on a budget of $3 million. So it wasn't a big budget film, but it definitely did lose money. It was generally well reviewed, and it did also win the Best First Feature award at the Independent Spirit Awards. Was the debut feature both for the director Michael Lehmann and for the writer Daniel Waters. Fairly well reviewed, but not necessarily overwhelmingly so. I feel like a lot of the strong response to it has come in later years, not necessarily right immediately.
Yeah, it's funny because you say it could be a cult classic. It's grown beyond a cult classic, I'd say.
Yeah, it has become a huge pop culture thing. So yeah, I think that's something that we've talked about in our cult classic picks, where it's like, at what point is this movie not a cult classic anymore and just a classic?
Right.
And I think maybe this has kind of gone across that line. So yeah, review-wise, I read Roger Ebert's review, which was a mixed review. Was entertaining because the tone of Roger Ebert's review is kind of like, what? I feel like Roger Ebert his whole review is like he just didn't get it. And it comes across as very much like Roger Ebert wondering what is up with kids today in 1989. So this is a more a straightforward portion of his review, though. In Lehmann's film, the heroine is so appalled by the snobbish behavior of her friends that she joins in a plot to murder them and disguise the deaths as suicides. What sets Heathers apart from less intelligent teenage movies is that it has a point of view toward this subject matter, a bleak, macabre, and bitingly satirical one. I imagine the film will indeed shock some adults with its cold-blooded treatment of death among the young, but after having weathered the 8-part Friday the 13th series and countless other dead teenager movies, I have grown so hardened to the sight of adolescent movie corpses that this film seems only a little more cynical than most. And he opens the review with a quote from Michael Lehmann saying that something along the lines of adults are shocked by this movie, but teenagers are not. And Ebert is kind of dismissive of teenagers, saying that part of growing up is learning to be shocked by things that don't shock you as a teenager. So he was a little get off my lawn about this movie.
Yeah, he's all like, you guys are teenage dirtbags, baby.
Yes, he quoted Wheatus
Yeah.
in 1989.
That's right.
I was kind of hoping, because we've quoted a couple Ebert reviews over time especially I think on these teenage movies where he goes into these rhapsodies about his own teenage years and his lust for ladies at the time, and there's none of that in this
Nothing
review.
of like, I thought of murdering my whole class.
Right, and I was sort of hoping for that, but
we're gonna get into it in the legacy, but it's sadly prescient, Josh, that teenage violence against other teenagers, especially in schools, like here it was so funny. In real life, not funny at all.
No, not usually.
No.
More positively, Rita Kempley in the Washington Post said, Heathers is not pretty in pink, all pom-poms and puppy love, but bodacious in black, chalkboard noir, the dark side of the wonder years. A cracked satire of the teen genre, it's slangy, raunchy, and gutsy as a prom date with Carrie. Caught somewhere between the numbing amorality of River's Edge and the heartfelt sap of John Hughes, Heathers chides the pursuit of popularity as it tackles the thornier topic of teenage suicide. More than just one of the best movies so far this year, it is a revolution in young adult entertainment.
I mean, you know, like when doing the research, there's very few movies before it that they say are like it, or that I couldn't think of anything. There's a movie from 1976, Massacre at Central High.
Yeah, it was often compared to that, which I think is like a Roger Corman B movie.
Right. But as far as, and you know, we've watched a ton of teen movies together,
We have.
and this is, as we will probably talk about, influential on a lot of them. But I didn't really think of anything that I remember like this before seeing this.
Yeah, I do think this movie is revolutionary in terms of its approach. And as we've said, I think what we maybe said when we talked about Say Anything, like the 80s are such a teen movie decade. I mean, teen movies are made at all times, but we
best teen movie decade.
There you go. But when you think of 80s teen movies, you more often think of John Hughes or Cameron Crowe and that kind of stuff. That not that those movies aren't good and that they don't have like genuine emotion to them, but I think this is so different from those.
Yeah, and yet deals with the same tropes in a honest way that makes it a valuable piece of art.
Yeah. Oh, of course. I certainly agree. And also, I saw a couple of Rita Kempley is not the only one. A couple of other reviews that I looked at, but don't have here quoted, compared it to this movie River's Edge, which I've never seen.
Oh, Kevin, who was in that? Kevin Bacon? No,
Maybe.
that's 92. Meryl Streep, River's Edge. I don't know.
No, I think it's probably another teen movie. I doubt Meryl Streep is in it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what this movie is. River's Edge.
Yeah, Dave, I don't know, but
let us know.
Yeah, apparently that was a similar movie in certain ways, and probably had come out like earlier that year or the year before or something like that. So since I love this so much, I figured it would be only fair to put a negative review in here as well. Jonathan Rosenbaum in the Chicago Reader said, Michael Lehmann's first film as a director and Daniel Waters' first film as a screenwriter, this misanthropic black comedy about the cruelty of high school teenagers succeeds at least in being offbeat, but its inanities and glib pretensions are so thick that it mainly comes across as tacky and contrived. The dialogue is relentlessly fancy without being witty, and the specious moralizing of the plot looks like it was tacked on to appease square adults. The real narrative force behind this movie is nihilist camp, as in Roger Corman's 1966 The Wild Angels, but without the same degree of filmmaking skills. If you're in a low mood, you might find it funny in spots.
Nihilist Camp, of course, my least favorite of all the ex-boyfriends in Scott Pilgrim.
River's Edge, actually, it's about a high school slacker commits a shocking act and proceeds to let his friends in on the secret. Starred Keanu Reeves, Crispin Glover, and Ione Skye.
All right.
Yeah, we should see that.
Yeah.
What year was that? 89 also or 88?
86.
86.
You know
okay.
what that sounds like? Also, Mean Creek. Was it Mean Creek?
Yeah, Mean Creek. That was a good one as well from
Yeah.
the OOs, I believe. That movie. Yeah.
Rory Culkin, maybe?
Maybe. Some Culkin.
Yeah. So many movies we've seen, they just all float in and out.
And so many Culkins.
I got most of the Culkins, sorted in my head.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, I mean, Rosenbaum is a notorious sort of cranky critic. And obviously, I don't agree really with anything he says. I think this movie is extremely witty. I don't think it's moralizing in a scolding kind of way necessarily. I don't find it tacky. And I find it funny throughout. So I disagree with everything he said, but that is an alternate perspective there.
Well, you got to have different perspectives, Josh.
You do. That's what we're all about here.
That is. So I got nothing else for this episode.
Thank you, Jason. So had you seen this movie before?
Yeah, I saw it, but I didn't see it when it was in the theaters.
Right.
I was just
nor
a
did
young
I.
lad. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did I see it? I don't think I saw it in like my teenage years. I think it must have been like in my 20s when I was catching up on the ones I missed.
Yeah.
And I really, really liked it then. And upon watching it this time, it was a little more problematic for me, Josh.
All right. That's fair. Yeah. I also didn't see this in theaters. It's certainly not a movie that I would have seen when I was 10 years old. And I caught this movie not on purpose. I remember the first time I saw this movie was on Comedy Central when I was in high school and just flipping past stuff on like a Sunday afternoon or something.
Friday night.
Maybe that could have been
8 p.m.
But just aimlessly, and probably started it from somewhere in the middle. And I remember being just like so drawn into this and like amazing. I don't know if I'd ever even heard of it before, but like blown away by it. And then going out and I'm sure renting it from, Blockbuster or something like that and watching the whole movie. And then I did own the VHS copy, probably also from Blockbuster, maybe a refurbished former rental.
I could have sold it to you.
You could have.
I
No.
didn't.
I think it was before. It might have been just before I moved to Vegas here and you and I met. I remember watching it at home when I lived in California before moving here. But it just drew me in, and everything about it I thought was so fascinating. And I think, being in high school at the time, having seen other teen movies that took different approaches, this struck me as so fresh, and it's just really, really funny. Also, I think, I was probably just laughing at the jokes, and I just would watch it again and again, and bits on TV, maybe even if I owned it, just if I caught it on TV. And the more I watched it, the more I really liked it. And I think some of it being my favorite movie of all time is just that you kind of, I don't know, at least maybe I do this. I come up with something and decide, okay, that's it. And then if people ask me, you always just have an answer, and sometimes I wonder like, well, if I really had to go back and look through every movie I've ever seen, is this still the number one? Yes, let's do that. That's our new podcast.
Yeah.
Every movie Josh has ever seen.
Jason, do you have a favorite movie of all time, like ready to go?
I mean, I have a short list of like Lebowski, Rushmore, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I think Aviator is on that list for me, but I can't. And good. I guess I would say Goodfellas if I had to go through.
Yeah.
Nice.
What about you?
Adaptation.
Not the 10.
Not the 10, but it's up there.
But I think this is the thing, and especially being a critic, like I would get that question enough that rather than going through like what you just did and say like, well, I love this one and I love this one and these are all kind of the top, people just want an answer.
Yeah.
And so I just decided that this was the answer. But I'm happy with this as the answer. Like watching it again now, it's like everything about this movie is great. There's nothing about this movie that I don't like. We talked about Batman earlier this season, which is another one of my favorites of all time. And looking at that, I can see like, well, this is flawed and this is flawed. But Heathers, I love everything about it.
Haha, then we shall do battle.
Let us do battle when we come right back and talk about our general thoughts on Heathers. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1989, we are talking about my personal pick, Heathers, which, as I have been saying, is my favorite movie ever. And if you're not familiar with it, the plot of this movie is Winona Ryder plays Veronica Sawyer, one of the most popular girls at Westerberg High School, and she hangs out with the Heathers, the three.
Right. She was not until she started hanging out with the Heathers.
Yes, and they are the most popular girls, three girls named Heather. But she's a bit conflicted about popularity in the whole high school hierarchy. And she starts dating bad boy Jason Dean, JD, played by Christian Slater, who kind of...
perfectly cast.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And he kind of encourages her antisocial tendencies. And eventually they go on a killing spree. Let's just say it. They murder some of the most popular...
Some murdering.
They do some murdering. And they disguise these murders as suicides and end up getting these popular vapid kids posthumous reputations that they don't deserve, only reinforcing the high school hierarchy. And eventually Veronica comes to realize that JD is a psychopath, and they are become enemies. But it's a satire. It's funny. I think it's hilarious.
It's very funny, so much so that I wrote down my 5 favorite lines,
All
which
right,
I will
let's hear them.
sprinkle throughout this
Oh,
show.
okay. All right. Is this in order? Should we start with number 5?
5. Grow up, Heather. Bulimia is so 87.
Yes, that is one Heather to another. I believe it's Shannen Doherty's Heather Duke who is bulimic, and Heather Chandler, the head Heather, is scoffing at her.
They're both so great in this movie. They're very strong, both of them.
Yeah. I mean, everyone, I think, in this movie, I think it's Kim Walker is her name, who plays Heather McNamara, and she was Christian Slater's girlfriend at the time.
Right. That's the cheerleader Heather, right?
No, that's the
Heather?
first Heather who dies. Yeah. Lisanne Falk plays the cheerleader Heather.
Okay, yeah.
Heather, that's Heather McNamara. Sorry, Heather Chandler is the main one.
Yeah, Heather Chandler's the
Yes.
main one, which I thought you would know since it's your favorite movie of all
Yes,
time.
I messed that up. I apologize.
And Heather Chandler, see, this is one of my issues. It's so hilarious that after she dies, like, the comedy isn't as strong because she's the funniest one of the bunch.
I mean, she is really funny. I think the comedy remains strong, but I do like her. Like, she's got a great performance, and Daniel Waters writes a lot of great lines for her.
Yeah.
She does briefly show up again in a dream sequence that Winona Ryder has, complaining about how heaven is boring, and there's nothing to do there.
A lot of it is just really great, and the way they introduce the different characters in school, where like, or the different cliques, like, hey, we're taking a poll for the paper, and you see them ask these different, groups, the dynamics between the Heathers and Veronica as a clique. JD right away just shocks you when he pulls a gun empty on Kurt and Ram. But I wrote down the phrase, very popular in comedy right now, punching down.
Right.
And there's a lot of punching down in this movie, which I thought you, of all people, being the social justice warrior that you are, would have some,
I mean,
from.
I am definitely not in favor of punching down, which is a term for making fun of people in a lower social or economic status,
taking the easy shot at people who have harder circumstances.
Yes, yeah. But I don't think that's what this movie does. I mean, I think the main target of the jokes in this movie are the people who are the most privileged, the
like
Heathers
Martha
themselves.
Dumptruck.
But Martha Dumptruck is a sympathetic character. I mean, the jokes that are made at her expense are meant to be, we're not meant to like. We're not meant to approve of the people making fun of Martha Dumptruck. The Heathers are the ones who are doing it. Kurt and Ram, you mentioned, who are the popular football players, are making fun of her. And she's a sympathetic character. So I don't think this movie is using her as a target of she's not the movie's target. She's the character's target. The characters that we're not meant to like.
Yeah, I felt like that doesn't. I mean, because she's a big.
She's a fat and awkward, unattractive. Yeah.
So I thought that was just too easy. But I get what you're saying. It's like, this is to make us dislike the Heathers more. But we don't dislike the Heathers, do we?
Well, I mean, they're entertaining to watch, but they're terrible people, I think is the point. And part of what makes them terrible people is the way that they treat Martha Dumptruck, or Kurt and Ram, the way that they use all these homophobic slurs all the time.
Okay, but then do you think the when they murder Kurt and Ram and have their like gay goodie bag that they put by them, like they were secretly gay, that's a little dated and played out. And it's like, oh, they drank mineral water, they're gay.
Right. I mean, but again, I think the joke is not, haha, gay people drink mineral water. The joke is that people in Ohio assume that anyone who drinks mineral water must be gay.
So you're looking at it as a meta type thing.
Yeah, the joke is on small-minded people. The joke is on people who give in to stereotypes. And JD knows that when he puts together that little goodie bag. He knows that when he puts these things in here, the small-minded idiot cops will assume that these people must be gay.
Well, fuck me gently with a chainsaw.
Is
Number 4 on my list.
All right. Yeah, that is a great. I feel like that's probably the most iconic line to come out of this movie.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Heather Chandler, man. She's hilarious. And Shannen Doherty showed such a good impulse for comedy. I wish we could have seen more in the next decade of her just being like funny.
Although I don't know if you read this, but
I did.
Yeah. So Shannen Doherty, of course, You're right. She's very funny in this movie, but was
unknowing.
upset. Yeah, she thought it was a serious drama and was upset when she saw the final product and realized that it was a comedy.
She ran out of the room crying.
Yeah.
And she's got a great line, which didn't make my top 5, but which is Veronica, why are you pulling my dick?
Yes.
Right? Which she smiles throughout because she thought, naughty word. Blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah.
she doesn't want to say the swear words. This movie has, I can't remember where it was. Maybe it was a Letterboxd review, somebody commenting about how this movie has such great use of swearing and that, that's a mark of a good comedy.
It's so important. I say this in stand-up all the time because you hear like comics like, oh, I was walking down the fucking street, and it's like, you're just wasting a fuck right there. You know, like if it doesn't have a meaning, like don't say it. And like they definitely make it all count here.
Yeah, they don't waste any of their fucks in this movie. I understand what you're saying about the potential for this being problematic. And certainly the school violence aspect of it would never fly right now. I mean, at the beginning of the movie, when JD is introduced and he pulls a gun and he fires the gun at Kurt and Ram, I mean, it's blank, so he doesn't hurt them. But still, the idea that in the next scene, the Heathers are talking about, it was just a prank. It's no big deal. He's not going to get expelled or suspended. And in fact, they say he might get suspended, but we never see him even getting suspended for this.
Just crazy. I mean, and sad in real life that's how far we've come from that. I remember maybe me and you talking about it, maybe me and my brother, but we were going to at some point write like either a play or a film, and it was going to be a spoof, and it was about 2 different groups who came to shoot up their high school on the same day, and they were like, no man, this was our day to do it. And like, I think when we came up with the idea, it was smart and funny, and now it's just like, no, that's not, there's just too much of this crap. I don't want to do it or go there.
Yeah.
I just laughed. So
yeah.
Right. I do think it's possible that you could make something. I mean, maybe not this particular movie and the story that they tell in this movie, but that someone could come up with something satirical and funny today about the topic of school violence that would work. But I do think it would be very difficult.
Yeah. One thing we were talking about was the writer and director both debut, and this is probably their height, right?
Yeah.
And it's like Daniel Waters said he wanted Kubrick to direct this, right?
Right. And he wanted to be 3 hours long.
Right.
And no, all of that would have been terrible.
So how did they get together, him and Michael Lehmann?
Yeah, there's no R in it.
How did they end up finding each other? What's the deal here, man?
I don't know. I assume Kubrick was unavailable. And the studio goes through people and Lehmann had, been on the list or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it is a weird sort of confluence of the right script and the right director, maybe because they hadn't done anything before. They didn't come in with any baggage. They were able to approach this the right way. But I mean, so much of we keep talking about the lines, like that's all in that script. I mean, he wrote just a phenomenal script.
Including my third favorite line in the movie. Did you have a brain tumor for breakfast?
Yes.
Which of course had a tragic
Kim Walker died of a brain tumor
when she was like 31, 32 years old.
Yeah, died young, very sad.
And they also, the guy who Jeremy Applegate, who played Peter, who praised that he never commits suicide in real life, committed suicide.
Sad ironies.
Those are sad.
Yeah.
And she's so funny. I was like, why haven't we seen more of Kim Walker? And
well, that's part
she
of
was
why.
working,
Yeah.
and she and Jennifer Aniston were best friends and moved out to LA together. But I really think she could have been a really funny Christina Applegate type going forward.
Yeah, definitely. And Lisanne Falk, who plays Heather McNamara, the cheerleader, I actually, when we watched Say Anything, I noticed her pop up for
They're
like 2
both in
seconds.
there.
Yeah.
Both of them are in there.
Yeah. I think I had only noticed her, but she, I assume, is still around, but, hasn't really.
Yeah. And, who originally was offered that part was Heather Graham.
Right.
Which I think she would have done a very good job with. But her parents thought the material was too dark, racy, edgy, and they would not let her play the part.
Well, I mean, I think this was clearly a movie, and we mentioned how it didn't do well at the box office. I think this was a movie that maybe audiences weren't ready for or didn't really understand what to expect out of it at the time that it was released.
Not just audiences. Winona Ryder's agent begged her not to take the part and thought she would be committing career suicide.
Right.
So.
But I mean, some of those stories, you hear that, and then it's like, oh, but then the movie came out and they saw that it was great or they saw that it was successful. And, it turned out that the person was right. I mean, I think we talked about this in relation to another movie.
Yeah,
now I can't remember what it was. It was Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
Right.
And,
Laura San Giacomo.
right. And that was a movie where immediately when it came out, it was so highly acclaimed and so successful that I'm sure that agent realized that their mistake.
Yeah.
But this is a movie that wasn't that way immediately, but, over time has certainly grown. I mean, and I think that's in part, because of the incredibly smart writing, but I think there's just so much great detail in everything about this movie, not just the dialogue, but the visuals. I think even as many times as I've seen this movie, I probably noticed some little different thing in a performance or
like what was something this
I mean,
time
something that was small, and it's not necessarily like brilliant comedy, but I noticed in the scene where Veronica and JD first have sex, he shows up at her window and they go play strip croquet.
Yeah.
And the camera is panning across the croquet as they're lying kind of in each other's arms under a blanket in the backyard. And there's a croquet mallet and two of the croquet balls kind of arranged in a suggestive manner. And that's
what does it suggest, Josh?
It suggests penis and testicles,
okay.
In case you were unsure of what that might be.
But that scene you're talking about, what I had noted is, how did he know where she lived? We had no justification for that.
I mean, I guess, I don't know. There was a school directory or something.
No,
I mean, that's
they had
not
like met once in school. I'm JD. I'm Veronica. I'm not a Heather. I'm a Veronica. And
right.
then, like the next thing, he's at her window. Come on, man.
Yeah. I mean, well, I think that's the thing is that he's this presumptuous guy. I mean, at that moment in the movie, we kind of think of him maybe as, he's the cool, smart guy as, in contrast to the Heathers and in contrast to Kurt and Ram, the football players. But it's an early indication of how unstable he is and how dangerous he is and toxic and everything that Veronica doesn't realize until later in the movie. Yeah. That JD is the actual villain of the movie.
Right. And as we know, not just from the performance, but by what Christian Slater said, very influenced by Jack Nicholson, and you could tell.
Yes, you can. I mean, and that's, I think, something that Christian Slater has been either accused or, I mean, I think he would embrace it, but certainly that was noted about a lot of his performances.
Greetings and salutations.
Yes, it's an excellent. Is that one of your top quotes?
No, it's not. No. But if you want my number 2 quote, I think we're up to, right?
Yeah.
It is, again, I think it's Heather Chandler who says, "What's your damage? You're being a real coos."
Yes.
Classic. Coos is a great jersey.
That is, yeah. There's so much great slang in this movie too. And I love, I mean, it's a mix of wordplay and things that Daniel Waters invented. I mean, the idea of using very, how very.
So very.
Yeah. And then that's not something that real teenagers ever said, but that he came up with for the movie.
Also, I don't think you heard teenage females talking like this, at least not on the screen at this point.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That movies like this would have male main characters. And not only is Veronica the main character and really the most fully realized person in this movie. I mean, she has conflicts internally. She goes along with JD at first and then comes to realize that, things have gotten out of control. She loves and hates the Heathers at the same time and feels conflicted about the high school sort of balance of power and all of that. And I like that too, that JD and Veronica are irritated that their fake suicides for these people have given them depth.
Yeah.
But I think the movie gives sympathy to those characters. I mean, especially Heather McNamara, the cheerleader character, who is sort of the, third tier Heather and wants to catch up with them and has her own suicide attempt where she's taking sleeping pills. And you really feel, I think, in the performance and also in the way that that's staged, you feel some pathos there.
Teenage suicide, don't do it.
Big fun. Yes. The fictional band created for this movie who has that, which is a totally believable, like Wham style 80s hit, I think.
Yeah. Things that I thought might not work that do work.
Yeah.
Are like the way Christian Slater and his dad talk to each other.
I love that.
Right. Where Christian Slater's like, "How was your day, son?" And the dad's like, "Good, Dad. Let me tell you what I did." And it's like, that could easily, had it not been executed perfectly, just been super schlocky. And the same thing with Veronica and her parents, because you're an idiot, Dad. And like, "Oh, yes, I am an idiot," like.
Right. And there's great parallels in those two scenes with Veronica and her parents, where at first she's talking about, coming back to school after spring break and I got a motor if I'm going to make it to this party. And then, the second scene where it's after Heather has died and how was the first week after her suicide and I got a motor if I'm going to make it to this funeral.
Right. Although I think the third scene where they're like, JD came over and said you were suicidal, and they just brush it off. I didn't think that one worked.
I mean, I think it shows the idea that these parents are oblivious, and that's meant to be their characterization, that they don't really understand Veronica or understand what's going on, and have concern for her, but don't really know how to express it. Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, those are them and JD's dad are the only parent characters we see in the movie. Although we see a lot of the teachers, especially Miss Fleming, the touchy-feely English teacher.
I like the principal myself.
Yeah, with his pipe that he's constantly poking at with a pencil.
Yeah, and he tells her, "Thank you. Let me know when your shuttle lands."
Yes.
She offers a plan. I thought he was a fun principal type.
Yeah, he was. I mean, and of course, the teachers are as much a target here as the students. You know, Miss Fleming, who has these hippie ideas, but really is just out to promote herself and get TV cameras to show up at the school so they can film her like holding hands with all the students. And of course, the principal, who's only worried about how much time do we need to give them off school for, he's saying, I'd give a half a day for a cheerleader.
Right. That's funny.
Yes.
He's talking about the popularity of the people. But, I don't know. Act 3, maybe not as tight as the first, 60 minutes where JD decides he's going to blow up the school, and Veronica kind of tracks him to the boiler room, and she has to stop the bomb, and she shoots him twice, and he still manages to make it out of the school and blows himself up, but not the entire school. I don't know. His speech, little exposition-y, so.
I mean, I guess, but I think it's part of like, we finally see what his ridiculous point of view is. And because he gives it in this speech, you realize how sad and pathetic he kind of is. And this is the final way to show you that he's not cool. He's never been cool. And it was just really this desperate move of his to get Veronica to kind of go along with him. I mean, I agree that like bomb with the ticking clock is a kind of cliched movie device that maybe is not necessary. But I like the way that this movie ends. I like that JD is essentially, not only he's defeated, but he becomes a loser at the end, and Veronica even says, "What do I want? I want losers like you out of my life." And she realizes that, he's not any better.
She doesn't say losers. She says cool guys.
Cool guys. You're right.
Yeah,
You're right.
so.
See, and I messed that up because the idea there is that he's not a cool, he thinks he's a cool guy, but he's just as lame as the football players, as the cheerleaders, and he's just as consumed with the idea of high school stratification as the rest of them are.
Yeah, I mean, the original ending was he succeeds in blowing the entire school up, and then there's like a prom in heaven where you see like all these mismatch pairs of like popular person and dork dancing, and Martha Dumptruck is giving like the entertainment for the night. That would have been an interesting ending.
I think, I'm so glad that they didn't use that ending. I mean, that goes to JD's speech where he says the only way that different social types can get along is in heaven.
Yeah.
But I think the movie is much stronger for the way that it undermines him at the end. And in fact, everyone else at the school is like he's so self-important, and literally everyone else is completely oblivious to what's going on. They don't pay any attention to him at all. To them, he means nothing. And I think that's a better way to end the movie than with that weird, surreal heaven thing. So, and this is a sense where I'm glad that a studio executive or whoever decided that was going too far.
Yeah, I didn't say I needed that ending.
Right.
So you can stop chastising.
I'm not chastising you. I'm praising what was done in the film. So what else did you think didn't work for you this time?
I mean, honestly, those were the real things where I just thought there was some punching down. I thought after Heather Chandler died, the humor dropped off a little, and I thought Act 3 didn't hold together as tightly as the first two acts.
Yeah. I mean, the Act 3 criticism I can sort of get. I do think this movie is consistently funny, and as many times as I've seen it, I was still laughing throughout the movie. Even past where Heather Chandler is gone. I think, as we were saying, Shannen Doherty is very funny, even if she wasn't doing it on purpose.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Heather Graham might have been a better Heather McNamara.
Really? You didn't like Lisanne Falk's performance?
I didn't think there was much to it.
Yeah, I mean, I do like especially that moment in the bathroom where Veronica comes and stops her from killing herself. I thought there was some depth to her performance there. And Winona Ryder is so good in this movie.
the other names bandied about were Drew Barrymore, Justine Bateman, and Jennifer Connelly, but this is Winona Ryder's movie.
Yeah,
so.
she's just fantastic in this role. And I mean, part of it is that, like I said, Veronica gets the most range and complexity of any of these characters. But I think it's a hard thing to do, especially to keep you like sympathetic to this character throughout the movie, even as she's participating in these murders. JD doesn't necessarily need to be sympathetic, but Veronica always does.
Yeah.
And I think Winona Ryder really gets that balance where you can understand what she's getting caught up in as she goes along with JD, but you can also believe her transition to being kind of his enemy.
Right.
The whole thing, I just think she's fantastic.
And of course, those two ended up, together, right? Christian Slater and Winona Ryder in real life.
Yeah, for a period of time.
Yeah, and the other JD names were Brad Pitt, Jim Carrey, Jason Bateman, Judd Nelson.
Those would have all been much worse.
I think Christian Slater just knocked this one. They both knocked it out of the park. So.
Yeah, they're both so fantastic. Those performances are really, I can't say enough about how good they are. I think the movie has a good visual style too.
Yeah, I agree. I'm like, why hasn't he gone on to do, like we talked about, he's a TV director, Lehmann, and this is, I guess, more legacy stuff. The movies I noted that he also directed were Airheads and Hudson Hawk, so
yeah,
didn't really go anywhere.
Right.
But man, what the heck? This totally great visual style. Like some cool angles when like Kurt and Ram are running away from JD as they try to avoid his, or maybe it's just Ram or Kurt.
Yeah, it's Kurt, I think, is the one who Veronica misses at first and he's running away.
And when Heather Chandler drinks the cleaning fluid and falls through the table, like just a really cool shot where she's not even through the table and you're like above her and the table's already breaking. Like, it was awesome. He did good stuff. So
yeah, this movie looks great. The dream sequences, which is, I mean, maybe part of the third act thing that didn't quite work for you, but I thought that looks great. The funeral where everyone is in like 3D glasses, and the shots of that the priest who is Glenn Shaddix, who was later in Beetlejuice, or was previously in Beetlejuice. Yeah, is so funny here as well. Yeah, it's put together. I feel like it is paced very well. The editing and everything. So I don't know what else I can possibly praise about this movie. I'm just going on.
Soundtrack?
Yeah, the music is good. There's not, I think, and also in contrast to a lot of teen movies of this era, we think of, these iconic like pop hits that were in John Hughes movies, or certainly, we talked about Say Anything earlier and Cameron Crowe's use of music, other than the Big Fun song, and then Que Sera Sera, which is sort of the theme that they use two versions of. This movie isn't full of pop songs, and I think it works because it gives it that sort of surreal quality. A Que Sera Sera, of course, is not exactly like an 80s pop hit or anything. It's something from way back in the 40s that Doris Day sang.
She would not give it the rights to it.
Right, and she would not let them use it in a movie that involves swearing. She was a very wholesome person, Doris Day. But the versions that they use in this movie, I think, are good. The score, too, I think it gives it that heightened edge where it's not, this isn't a realistic movie per se, but I think it gets at a lot of real ideas and emotions about being a teenager and about high school and about society, because as JD says, the school was society.
Well, that was not my number one line.
What is your number one line?
Still, I think a motto we can all live by. If you want to fuck with the Eagles, you have to learn how to fly.
Yeah, that's your number one line?
Yeah, I love that line. That's a great line, man. Okay. And it's so early in the movie that like I feel like it sets a tone.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. I mean, I think there's just tons of great lines. I said, so, Fuck Me Gently with a Chainsaw, I think is the one that's the most memorable in this movie. Just because it's such a vivid image.
Yeah.
Anything else in particular that you liked?
What's his name? The guy, Big Fun.
The songwriter?
Yeah.
Don Dixon.
Right. A very influential musician.
Yeah. Produced REM albums at the time, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, other than that, I think everything kind of goes into legacy section, other than that they, in foreign territories, they call this movie Lethal Attraction.
Which is a terrible title.
Yeah.
But and obviously didn't help with the box office.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, to me, and it kind of, goes, look, it was Entertainment Weekly ranked it as the number 5 best high school movie of all time of their 50. Empire Magazine ranked it as the 42nd best movie of the 500 greatest movies. Like, it's just so interesting that neither Lehmann nor Waters like went on to like really anything. Like, they work, but I mean, Waters, didn't he co-write Batman Returns?
He did, yeah.
Yeah. So after that, there really wasn't much going on.
Yeah,
I'd say.
yeah. That is, and as much as I love this movie, I can't think of anything that I've seen that either of those guys worked on that I had anywhere near the same amount of affection for.
Yeah.
So should we give this a rating out of I don't know, out of Heathers?
5 chainsaws.
5 chainsaws to be fucked gently with?
Yeah. 3.5 for me.
All right. I give it 5. Like I said, I honestly think this is a perfect movie.
Yeah. To me, I think it was probably 4.5 the first time. And
yeah. Oh, it really fell off for you then.
I mean, yeah, 3.5's good though.
No, 3.5 is good. Yeah. Well, we mentioned a bit about Daniel Waters and Michael Lehmann, but we can come back and talk more about them and the legacy of Heathers.
Are you tired of stumbling across the same old kind of podcast show with a couple of white guys every other day, talking about different forms of entertainment such as movies, music, video games? Well, too bad, because we got another one for you. Introducing the world's most unoriginal and anti-niche podcast ever, the Podwood Forecast. Hosted by Mitchell Owens.
I steal money from poor innocent people who got in car crashes.
And yours truly, Clifford Close. This is a podcast we do for fun where we talk about the little things we enjoy. The Podwood Forecast. Available on any podcast platform.
Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1989, we're talking about my personal pick, Heathers. And we mentioned a bit about the legacy of this movie, in particular about the writer and director, Daniel Waters and Michael Lehmann, who really never lived up to this film.
Yeah, like we said, Daniel Waters. There's a movie that looked interesting that I never saw called Happy Campers.
Yeah, he wrote and directed a couple. That movie, Happy Campers, and Sex and Death 101. Yeah. But neither of those have particularly good reputations and certainly didn't make any kind of impact. I haven't seen either one.
I like that he had a column like in his own high school called Troubled Waters, where he would make up fictitious stories about real classmates.
Right. I think that was a part of the influence on writing this screenplay.
So yeah, that's part of it to me, is just like, man, what happened here, like, to these two guys?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's that they weren't offered the opportunities to use their talents, or maybe this was all they had in them.
Yeah.
The one movie that they worked on together after this was Hudson Hawk.
Yeah.
That Daniel Waters was one of the writers and Michael Lehmann directed. And I've never seen that, but that has, of course, a reputation as being one of the worst movies ever made.
Right. A huge bomb, too.
Yes. Daniel Waters did, as we said, co-write Batman Returns, as well as Demolition Man, which is a movie I like. But I mean, in both of those cases, he's just one of many writers. So who knows how much influence he
He's
had.
probably like a punch-up guy, who's getting paid a lot, but not getting a lot of credits. Michael Lehmann works all the time in television, constantly working in television.
Yeah, he hasn't directed a feature since I think like 2007, but he directs TV all the time. I kind of have some affection for Airheads.
Yeah, I know. And Dave loves that movie.
Do you, Dave?
I do love Airheads.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Have you seen Heathers?
It's been a while, but I loved it back in the day.
Winona Ryder always talking about Heathers too.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I think that the moment has passed.
I don't
for
think
that.
it'll work.
Yeah,
I do like that Shannen Doherty played JD's mom on the TV series Heather.
Yeah, which was a giant failure, that Heathers TV series. It was like just
recent, right?
It was very recent. It was maybe 2018. But I think, like we were talking about, the prevalence of this kind of stuff in reality, there were so many incidences that they kept postponing the premiere of that show.
Right.
And then when it finally did premiere, it got terrible reviews. And eventually, even then, as it was airing, there was yet another shooting, and they truncated the final episode and they didn't want to run it. And I've never seen any of it. I was actually looking to see if it was available somewhere before, to maybe just watch an episode before this. And it's only available to like purchase digitally. It's not.
Yeah, I never saw it, but I don't think you can. It's tough to recapture these. I know they did Heather's the musical because that's everyone's doing everything the musical, and that had like a semi-successful run. And then there was an episode on Riverdale where they did the musical on the show.
Right.
Kind of fun, but yeah, I don't know. The Veronicas, the band that we
don't know anything
just
about.
know as the Veronicas, named after Veronica Sawyer.
Yeah. I have seen Heather's the musical. I saw a production here locally in Vegas, and I remember thinking the songs are good, and the performance that I saw here was solid. I think it was the Onyx Theater here.
Was it like the Majestic Rep Players, or who did?
I don't remember. It was at the Onyx Theater. I can't remember which theater company it was now.
Yeah.
But my issue with it, and it's been a little while, but I remember thinking that it completely failed to capture the like darkness and satire of the movie.
Yeah.
And it was just very sanitized, like as the way that they structured the story, but I don't remember enough specific details.
Yeah.
I will mention about the Heather's TV series that, which again, I haven't seen, but just reading about it, we talked about the alternate ending for the movie, Daniel Waters' original ending, where the prom, where everyone's dead and there's a prom in heaven. And that was how the TV series ended.
Oh, okay.
So they used that. The school, in fact, blew up, everyone died, and they used that ending.
I know there was also in the original ending, it might have been an alternate of the alternate ending, but it's Martha Dumbtruck stabs Veronica and yells, "Fuck you, Heather." And as she's like laying there clutching to life, she goes, "I'm not a Heather. I'm not a Heather."
Yeah. I mean, again, I think the actual ending is stronger than both of those. And I don't know how that worked on the TV show.
And the actual ending is JD blows himself up. The school is kind of reset, and Veronica, who's now the boss bitch,
yes,
as Cardi B might say, Oker, says, she goes up to Martha Dumbtruck and says, "My prom date is not really available anymore. Would you like to get some new releases? Yes. Watch some videos together?"
Yes.
She says, "I'd like that."
Which is her only line in the whole movie.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and like I was saying before, the idea that JD blows himself up, that his grand plan turns to nothing and no one even knows or cares what he did, I think is the perfect thing to do.
Now, did you like the Edna's Goldfish song, Veronica Sawyer, also covered by Real Big Fish?
No, but I'm glad you are reaching deep into the
influence.
Minutia.
People love this movie of all different types.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think that does speak to it, that musicians are inspired by this movie. The other thing about the TV series, though, you're talking about punching down. And what they did in the TV show is the Heathers themselves are like these queer people of color. They took the marginalized people and made them into the Heathers, the like people that were meant to hate. And a lot of what I read about the show is that was just kind of like a tone deaf reimagining of it. And that's punching down, because then the people that are being held up as terrible are the marginalized people.
I mean, I would, but okay, but it's a TV show, so it's more than one episode, right?
Right.
And had it just been 4 pretty white girls, then I think that's also tone deaf to today. And maybe you needed a mix of some of everything.
Yeah, I don't know. And again, I haven't seen it, but this is just based on reviews that, again, we're not positive at all.
It just seemed like a doom project to begin with.
It clearly was. And there was a whole second season that they were going to do. Was going to be some sort of anthology thing. And the second season was going to be set in like 18th century France or something like that, like around Marie Antoinette times, that very divide between the rich and poor kind of thing. And which was, I guess, set up in the finale and of course never came to pass.
I would like to have seen that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious to watch the show if it was, more readily available. But the other thing I wanted to mention was the presence of Jim Poor Man Trenton, former host of Loveline
and creator of Loveline.
Yes, which I at the time that I saw this movie was also a huge fan of Loveline, living in Southern California, listening to Poor Man on K-Rock, and I think this might have been a little boost for the old Poor Man, who of course lost out when Loveline became very popular without him, with Adam Carolla.
Adam Carolla.
Yeah, is that your Adam Carolla impression?
I'm 20 years behind the times now. My jokes aren't funny. It's not
Yeah.
a good impression. at
No,
all.
it's really
Yeah.
not.
Dave's hair is kind of like Adam Carolla's.
Not really.
Thanks.
We've compared Dave's hair to so many things
I
in
know.
various episodes, but I
Yeah.
feel like that's maybe the
Dave,
weakest.
as I said on the phone to you last night, has the uncut gems of hair.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys were talking about me last night. That's
Yeah,
good.
well, we talk about you a lot.
Yeah.
Hey, you know, one other little tiny piece of legacy is Josh Bell on his very first appearance on Piecing It Together used Heathers as a puzzle piece.
Oh
for
yeah, to talk
Thoroughbreds.
about Thoroughbreds, which is a great movie. And
Very, very, yeah, like you can totally see that Heather's led to Thoroughbreds.
Yeah,
and a lot of movies.
so many. I mean, this movie is incredibly influential. And
Yeah.
I noted down some other big teen movies. Mean Girls, of course.
Yeah.
Jawbreaker, The Craft, Clueless, even Gossip Girl, the TV series. You can feel that influence. And, you know, like the invention of slang. We mentioned, you know, the thing like calling things very. I don't think that actually caught on. But one thing that I noticed in this movie that I think it was the first to do that people do say, you know, when one of the Heathers says like drool much, and that construction of like something much,
Yeah.
I feel like is something that this movie invented that people now use.
Yeah. What did you think? Okay, here's another issue that of the movie. Winona Ryder said her favorite scene is when she's breaking away from the jock, and in the background you see one of the Heathers getting date raped. And
Yeah.
like, it's very satirical, but I guess that type of humor you can't really utilize nowadays.
No, I don't know that you could, or like I said, it would be really difficult to get the balance right. But I think this movie does do that. And again, I think that's why it's not punching down, because it's not holding up these people as good people who do these terrible things. Like Kurt and Ram, even though we can sort of see some sympathy for them. I mean, in the funeral scene, especially where you see Ram's little sister and she's crying, and the dad, that's another great line. I love my dead gay son. That's
Yeah.
such a classic line. You know, you can see that his family really cared about him, but he's also not like a good person.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm not defending any of the characters, but
Yeah.
how many of us were really fully formed good people in high school?
Well, no. But I mean, I think that that's what this shows, is that no one is fully evil or fully good here in this movie. There's a lot of complexity to it. And that's one of the things I like about it.
Yeah.
So that is Heathers. And that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can follow us on the social media.
Yep, you can, which was not around during Heather's.
No, but if it was, I
They
think
would be
they could
pretty-
have made use of it.
They'd be
Yeah.
very big on the Insta,
Yes.
I think. I'm on the Insta,
Oh, are you?
Jason Harris Comedy, also on the Facebook there. J Harris Comedy on the Twitter, goforjason.com on the website. And then Awesome Movie Year on the Facebook and the Insta. Awesome Movie Pod on the Twitter.
You can find me at joshbellhateseverything.com, Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, and at Signal Bleed on Twitter. And listen to our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
You can listen to it wherever you listen to this podcast, and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod, and join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces.
What's up next time, Jason?
Next is our foreign film, Josh. Pedro Almodovar's Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down. I've never seen it. I'm excited.
I haven't either. I've seen a lot of later Almodovar films, but not that. So that'll be an interesting one for us to talk about. Tune in next time for Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down. And thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
And all points west.